$500 billion. That's the economic atomic bomb that just detonated in Anthony Albanese's face, and the Prime Minister's response has been nothing short of absolute political panic. While you've been distracted by reality TV and social media drama, Australia's most powerful business leaders just delivered a devastating ultimatum to Labor that could destroy our entire economy and send your electricity bills through the stratosphere. The Business Council of Australia, representing over 100 of our nation's biggest companies, has unleashed a McKinsey report so damning, so utterly catastrophic for Albanese climate fantasies, that Labor's inner circle is reportedly in complete meltdown mode. This isn't just another boring policy disagreement, this is economic warfare, and your wallet is the battlefield. The Business Council has essentially told Albanese, back down from your insane 70% emissions reduction target, or watch Australia's economy collapse faster than a house of cards in a cyclone. We're talking about losing $150 billion in exports every single year, the destruction of entire regional communities, and the elimination of hundreds of thousands of jobs. Also, Albanese can virtue signal to his Green Left mates at international climate summits. But here's what will absolutely blow your mind and has Albanese spin doctors working overtime to suppress. The Business Council's report doesn't just expose Labor's economic incompetence, it reveals a deliberate plan to sacrifice Australian prosperity on the altar of climate ideology. While the PM smiles for cameras and promises a just transition, his government is secretly preparing to obliterate our mining industry, destroy our energy independence, and turn Australia into a renewable energy colony dependent on Chinese solar panels and batteries. The McKinsey modelling that has Labor strategists reaching for the Valium shows exactly what Albanese's 70% emissions reduction target really means for ordinary Australians. We're not just talking about slightly higher power bills or a few job losses in coal mining. This is a complete economic transformation that will fundamentally reshape how every Australian lives, works, and survives. The report reveals that achieving these targets will require forcing Australians to buy electric vehicles whether they can afford them or not, mandating that airlines use expensive sustainable fuels that could double airfare costs, and creating an army of 60,000 new government-funded climate bureaucrats by 2030. What's driving Albanese absolutely insane is how the Business Council timed this report release. Just as Labor was preparing to announce their final emissions commitment on the world stage, Australia's biggest employers basically said, "Hold up there, Prime Minister, let us show you what economic suicide actually looks like." The timing couldn't be more devastating for a government that's already struggling with cost of living pressures and sliding poll numbers in key marginal seats. Here's the part that will make your blood boil. While Albanese lectures Australians about making necessary sacrifices for climate action, the Business Council's report reveals that the biggest sacrifice will be made by working families who can't afford electric vehicles, small business owners facing skyrocketing energy costs, and regional communities watching their entire economic foundation disappear overnight. Meanwhile, the wealthy inner-city elites who vote for Labor will barely notice the difference as they drive their subsidised Teslas to their government-funded renewable energy jobs. The $150 billion annual hit to gas and coal exports isn't just a number on a spreadsheet, it represents the complete demolition of industries that employ hundreds of thousands of Australians and generate billions in royalties that fund our hospitals, schools, and infrastructure. But Albanese doesn't care because these workers don't live in his trendy inner Sydney electorate or donate to Labor's campaign funds like the renewable energy lobby does. What's particularly infuriating is how Labor's been caught completely off guard by the Business Council's intervention. Internal sources suggest that Albanese's team genuinely believed they could ram through their extreme climate targets without serious business opposition. They thought Australia's corporate leaders would just roll over and accept economic devastation for the sake of international climate diplomacy. Instead, they got a reality check so brutal that Labor MPs are reportedly questioning whether their leader has any understanding of basic economics. The Business Council's call for bipartisan approach to climate policy is diplomatic language for Albanese has completely lost the plot and needs adult supervision. When Australia's most powerful business lobby feels compelled to publish a report warning about economic catastrophe, it's not because they are climate deniers, it's because they've done the math and realised that Labor's policies will bankrupt the country. But here's where it gets really sinister, and this is the part that proves Albanese knew exactly what his policies would do to Australian families. Climate advocacy groups are privately expressing concerns about the McKinsey findings. That means Labor's own allies in the environmental movement are worried that the truth about climate policy costs might derail their ideological agenda. They'd rather keep Australians in the dark about the real price of net zero than allow honest debate about economic impacts. The modelling showing that airlines must adopt sustainable fuels reveals the hidden cost of climate virtue signalling that no politician wants to discuss. When your next family holiday to Queensland costs twice as much because of mandatory sustainable aviation fuel, remember that Albanese knew this would happen but chose climate politics over Australian families' financial well-being. The same goes for the forced transition to electric vehicles. This isn't about consumer choice, it's about government coercion designed to reshape how Australians live regardless of individual circumstances or preferences. The requirement for 60,000 new workers by 2030 sounds impressive until you realise what it actually means: a massive expansion of government-funded climate bureaucracy while private sector jobs in traditional industries disappear. We're talking about replacing productive mining and energy jobs that actually generate wealth with subsidized renewable energy positions that depend entirely on taxpayer funding and international supply chains controlled by China. What's most outrageous is how Albanese's freak-out response has focused entirely on attacking the messenger rather than addressing the message. Instead of honestly confronting the economic implications of his climate commitments, the Prime Minister's office has unleashed a coordinated campaign to discredit the Business Council and question McKinsey's modelling methodology. This is classic Labour playbook politics: when confronted with inconvenient facts, attack the source and hope the media doesn't dig too deeply into the actual substance. The Business Council represents companies that employ millions of Australians, generate billions in tax revenue, and understand economic reality in ways that career politicians never will. When these business leaders warn about $500 billion costs, they are not making political arguments, they are presenting mathematical facts about what happens when ideology collides with economic reality. Labour's internal polling must be absolutely catastrophic for Albanese to be reacting this aggressively to legitimate business concerns. Regional seats that depend on mining and energy exports are already swinging away from Labour, and the Business Council's report provides concrete evidence for why voters should be terrified of Albanese's climate agenda. The Prime Minister isn't just losing the political argument, he's losing the economic argument so badly that his own traditional business supporters are publicly opposing his signature policy. The international implications of Australia potentially losing $150 billion annually in export revenue should terrify every Australian who understands how our economy actually works. We're not just talking about domestic policy choices, we're talking about deliberately destroying Australia's competitive advantages in global markets while our competitors like Indonesia and Qatar increase their resource exports to fill the gap we're creating. Here's what really exposes Labour's climate hypocrisy. While Albanese demands that Australian workers sacrifice their livelihoods for emissions reductions, countries like China continue building coal-fired power stations and India increases its fossil fuel consumption. Australia's emissions reductions will be completely offset by increased production elsewhere, but Australian workers will still lose their jobs and Australian families will still pay higher energy costs. The Business Council's warning about bipartisan climate policy reveals something crucial that Albanese desperately wants to hide: his extreme targets don't have democratic mandate or broad community support. If Labour's climate policies were genuinely popular and economically sound, they wouldn't need to be rushed through without proper consultation or honest cost analysis. The fact that business leaders are demanding bipartisan approach proves that Albanese is trying to impose ideological solutions without building genuine consensus. What's particularly damning is how the McKinsey report exposes the complete disconnect between Albanese's international climate commitments and domestic economic reality. While the Prime Minister jets around the world promising dramatic emissions reductions to impress international audiences, the actual cost of delivering those commitments falls on Australian workers, families, and communities who never voted for economic suicide. The timing of this Business Council intervention, just before Labour's final emissions announcement, demonstrates how completely out of touch Albanese has become with the business community that actually creates jobs and generates tax revenue. These aren't fringe climate skeptics or political opponents, these are the CEOs and board members of Australia's most successful companies warning that Labour's policies will cause economic catastrophe. Labour's response strategy has been to dismiss business concerns as scare campaigns while refusing to release their own economic modelling of climate policy impacts. If Albanese's policies are so beneficial for Australia, why won't he publish detailed analysis of their economic effects? Why is Labour so desperate to prevent honest debate about the real costs of their climate agenda? The forced transition to electric vehicles highlighted in the McKinsey report reveals how Labour's climate policies will disproportionately impact working families who can't afford new cars or don't have access to charging infrastructure. While wealthy inner-city professionals can easily switch to electric vehicles with government subsidies, families in regional areas or lower-income households will be forced to bear the costs of Labour's ideological preferences without receiving any of the benefits. This Business Council warning represents a turning point in Australian climate politics because it demonstrates that even traditional supporters of emissions reduction are concerned about Labour's extreme approach. When your own allies start warning about economic catastrophe, it's time to reconsider whether your policies are actually serving Australian interests or just satisfying international climate activists. The $500 billion price tag attached to Albanese climate commitments isn't just an economic cost, it's a measure of how far Labor is willing to go in sacrificing Australian prosperity for international approval. While other countries pursue pragmatic approaches that balance environmental goals with economic reality, Australia's Prime Minister has chosen ideological purity over practical outcomes. The Business Council's final warning to Labor isn't just about climate policy, it's about whether Australia will remain a prosperous, independent nation or become a renewable energy colony dependent on foreign technology and international approval. Albanese's freak-out response proves he knows exactly which path his policies are leading us down. If you thought tonight's story was wild, trust me, what happens next will blow your mind. So don't stop now. Click on the video right here on your screen to continue the chaos, the drama, and the inside scoop only we deliver. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and join the Australian News CC family where the real stories come to life. See you in the next one.